Pheasants aren't some impossible, exotic, can't-be-farmed bird. They're raised commercially in the US right now. Commercial farms hatch large numbers of them every year. People say it all the time: old-school farmers, hunting guides, backyard homesteaders. Pheasants? Those are easy to raise. So here's the part that doesn't add up. If they really are that easy to raise, why isn't pheasant sitting on the shelf next to chicken in every grocery store in America? Why did chicken become one of the world's dominant meats? While a bird we can clearly farm just fine stayed a rare, specialty item almost nobody's ever tasted. Stick with me, because the answer isn't that pheasants can't be raised. It's that being easy enough to raise is not even close to the same thing as being cheap enough to industrialize. Let's break down exactly where that gap comes from. So first, let's clear something up, because this isn't really a lie. It's just incomplete. If you're raising a handful of pheasants in a backyard coop, or in an open pen for hunting, sure, they're pretty manageable. They're hardy, they handle cold weather fine, and they've still got strong wild instincts that basically keep them alive with minimal help. But here's the problem: easy to raise a few for fun, and easy to raise thousands, on a schedule, at a profit, are two completely different games. Think of it like this: one person can easily carry one brick across a yard. Easy, right? Now ask that same person to move 10,000 bricks, one at a time on a deadline, and still come out ahead financially. Suddenly, easy stops meaning much of anything. And that's the trap hiding inside the phrase, easy to raise. Easy for a farmer with a backyard pen isn't the same thing as easy for an entire industry. That gap only gets wider once you compare pheasants to the bird they're actually competing against. Now let's talk chickens for a second, because chicken is the benchmark modern poultry production is built around. Many modern broilers are grown to roughly 6 pounds or more in around 6 to 8 weeks, depending on the market and production system. Pheasants raised for meat take 16 to 22 weeks to reach harvest, several times longer. And even then, they only weigh 2.5 to 3.5 pounds. Smaller than a market chicken. So what does this mean in real numbers? There's a measurement called feed conversion ratio, how many pounds of feed it takes to add 1 pound of live body weight. Commercial broilers are generally reported in the range of 1.5 to 1.8 pounds of feed per pound of gain. Pheasants raised for meat, tracked across a full 16-week grow-out on that same live weight basis, have been reported closer to 3 pounds of feed per pound of gain, and the ratio gets worse the longer they're grown. Put simply, pheasants need meaningfully more feed for a bird that ends up smaller and takes multiple times longer to get there. And that feed gap gets worse before it gets better, because it's not just the quantity of feed working against pheasants. It's what's actually in it. Young pheasants are typically started on high-protein game bird rations, because their early growth and feather development place heavy demands on the diet, noticeably more than what young chickens are typically started on. So picture two farmers side by side. One's feeding standard chicken starter feed. The other is feeding a premium, protein-dense game bird starter to a bird that's still going to grow slower and finish smaller anyway. From the very first week of life, the cost math is already working against the pheasant. And feed isn't even the biggest headache. Because pheasants come with a problem chickens mostly don't have anymore. They still behave like wild animals. Here's something interesting. Today's commercial chickens are the product of intense, targeted breeding, especially over the last 100 years, specifically selected to stay calm in crowded conditions. Pheasants never went through that same industrial breeding process. Biologically, they're still, in a lot of ways, wild game birds wearing a farm badge. So what happens when you house a bunch of wild-minded birds at high density? Stress, feather pecking. In bad cases, cannibalism. When pheasants get overcrowded or stressed, they can peck at each other's feathers and skin, sometimes badly enough to injure or kill flock mates. And when they get startled, a shadow, a loud noise, they don't calmly step aside. They flush and pile into corners on top of each other, which can lead to birds being crushed or suffocated. So how do producers manage this? Couple of ways. 1. More space. In confined indoor meat production systems, pheasants need around 5 square feet per bird, several times more space than chickens typically require in comparable indoor systems. That's a real difference in land, barn size, and construction cost for the same number of birds. 2. And this genuinely surprises people. Producers may fit small plastic devices, sometimes called peepers or blinders, onto individual birds' beaks to block their forward vision and cut down on pecking. Picture running a food business where part of your labor, depending on your setup, involves individually fitting devices onto thousands of animals, one at a time. That's a reality of pheasant meat production that chicken farming mostly left behind decades ago. But even if a producer solves the feeding problem and the housing problem, there's still one issue waiting at the very start of the entire production line. A modern commercial laying hen can produce well over 250 eggs a year under controlled indoor conditions. A pheasant hen lays during a much shorter breeding season, producing somewhere around 30 to 50 eggs a year. So what does this mean? The entire supply of baby pheasants is bottlenecked from the very top of the chain. Fewer eggs per hen means fewer chicks, which means higher costs baked in before a single bird has even hatched. Now here's a detail almost nobody outside the industry knows about. Commercial chicken processing falls under mandatory federal poultry inspection. Pheasants are handled differently. They fall under a voluntary inspection framework for non-amenable game birds, and producers who want that official mark of inspection, particularly to sell into certain channels, generally have to opt in and cover associated fees themselves. It's a smaller piece of the puzzle than people expect, but it's one more layer of cost and complexity that chicken producers simply don't carry in the same way. And here's maybe the most surprising twist in this whole story. A meaningful share of pheasants raised commercially in America aren't destined for a dinner plate at all. They're raised specifically to be released onto hunting preserves and wildlife management land. That means part of the infrastructure supporting commercial pheasant production is built around a market that isn't supermarket meat at all, hunting. For many pheasant operations, meat production exists alongside a much larger hunting and game bird market. So let's bring it all together. Pheasants aren't difficult to raise because farmers are bad at their jobs, and they're not some fragile, unmanageable animal. Pheasants can absolutely be raised successfully. Plenty of people do it. What they're not is optimized for cheap, large-scale food production. The slower growth, the pricier feed, the wild instincts, the seasonal eggs, the different regulatory category. None of that makes pheasants hard. It just makes them built for something other than a supermarket shelf. Chicken didn't win because it's some naturally better animal. Chicken won because it went through generations of intense, deliberate selective breeding, especially over the last century, layered on top of an industrial system built entirely around those genetics. Pheasant never went through that transformation. Honestly, it never really needed to. It's still out there doing what it was built for, being wild. So the real answer to why don't we eat pheasant everywhere isn't that it's impossible. It's that easy to raise and easy to mass produce turned out to be two very different questions, and only one bird ever got optimized to answer both. If you like finding out why some animals became everyday food while others never did, subscribe, because there are a lot more strange food choices hiding in plain sight.